doing? We're looking to the skies, and our feathered friends never cease to amaze as they soar through the clouds. And one man who's kept a keen eye on them for the past 5 decades, to the best of my memory, is none other than Canberra ornithologist and author Neil Hermes. And he joins us now. Neil, good morning.
Good morning, Josh.
Fantastic to have you along, matey. Now, I've got to start with this story. It is terrific. We head to Phillip Island this time, where local businesses have got together to help shearwater fledgelings. Neil, can you tell us a bit more about the Dark Skies So Shearwaters Fly movement?
Look, this is a fabulous thing. Now, this time of the year, April, there's this special seabird that we have that nests at Phillip Island in Victoria, and they nest along the coast of New South Wales and other parts of Victoria and South Australia as well. But it's called the short-tailed shearwater. And at this time of the year, the youngsters come out of their burrows and they set off for a migration, which is 15,000 kilometres to the Bering Sea, just off Alaska. So these birds, they come out of the burrow and they head off on this epic migration when they come up out of their burrows. But the problem is, as they come out of their burrows, normally, on an island or a beach, it would have been dark in the past. But today we have lights around our towns and things, and this can confuse the birds. So on Phillip Island, where they have 1 million short-tailed shearwaters nesting on the island, the businesses there at this time of the year turn their lights off at night. So as the young shearwaters come out, they don't get confused by the lights and they fly out to sea and they have half a chance of making it to Alaska over the next few weeks.
This is absolutely terrific. Now, obviously, Phillip Island is a haven for a lot of different species, that sort of thing. So do you think that they're more sympathetic or more empathetic towards their, just making sure that it just sounds like a concept that most areas would not think of?
Yeah, look, I think that's true. I think in other parts of the coast where the birds are, here and there along the coast, perhaps businesses and households wouldn't think of the shearwaters. And on Phillip Island, they are actually very conscious. Of course, it's famous for its penguins. But, these short-tailed shearwaters, imagine it. This bird is half a kilo in weight. The wingspan's about a metre. So you hold your hand out, the span of your hand.
Yep.
It flies 15,000 kilometres in 8 weeks to Alaska. And then in September next year, flies all the way back. And these birds live for 35 years. Some of these birds will fly 1 million kilometres in their lifetime.
Wow.
It's extraordinary. And to think what we can do is turn some lights off, a bit early, just so that they can get away is not a big deal for us, really. To give these birds, half a chance of completing these epic migrations. I think it's just a fantastic story out of Phillip Island.
Yeah.
And I wish them all the luck with the migration as it heads out over the next few weeks, and it has been over the last few weeks on Phillip Island.
Now, I know they've also taken some other measures as well. There was an issue with some of the shearwaters sort of being run over, wasn't there? They're sort of taking a few more. But just back to 15,000 kilometres from Phillip Island to Alaska. I mean, that's a hell of a migration. And look, this might sound like a very amateur question, but do they make pit stops on the way to rest and recuperate, or is it just, they just plough straight there? How does that work?
Well, they've calculated that with using little trackers on the birds, that they do the journey in about 6 to 8 weeks.
Right.
So clearly they're a seabird, so they can land on the water.
Yep.
So yes, they're not doing it, flying the whole time. But one of the things that they can do, which is amazing, and we're only learning more about it now, is because they have these wide wings and they soar in the air, they can actually use the updrafts off the ocean to help them move along. And if they pick the right weather patterns, they can be in updrafts most of the time. So they sweep up and down across the fronts, the various low and high fronts of the ocean, making sure that they've always got the wind helping them rather than hindering them. So it's a very, very calculated flight. But yep, they do pit stops, and they feed on krill and small fish, that sort of stuff, usually on the surface of the water. But some of the young birds, when they first come out of the burrow, these birds have just come out of the burrow, they've just hatched, essentially. They're not so good at feeding, and sadly, in some years, we get, starvation can occur because the birds can't feed well in those first few weeks. We sadly do get some of the young birds not making it past the east coast of Australia, and they get washed up.
Yeah.
But they make this extraordinary 30,000 kilometre round flight once a year.
That's amazing. What I was going to say, because we were talking about the 15,000 kilometre flight, but once it's all done, they come back.
Every year, Josh. Every year.
So is this like their winter? You hear of people having winter vacations where they go. Is it similar for the shearwater fledglings or?
Absolutely, they love being in Victoria in the summer because it's nice and warm and there's lots of food, and then they love being in Alaska in their summer because it's nice and warm and plenty of food. So it's exactly the same thing.
Very good. And do they stay over there for 6 months at a time or anything like that, or they just decide?
Yeah, it's 3 or 4 months during the northern summer. Mm-hmm. They're feeding at the time when there's huge amounts of food being produced in the ocean there. So they're always living somewhere where there's plenty of food. So. Yep. That's a bonus for having to endure this extraordinary migration that they do. The short-tailed shearwaters are the birds that some people might know as mutton birds. They nest on islands in Bass Strait as well. And in the past, sailors used to catch them when they're at sea and use them for food. So sometimes you'll hear them called mutton birds as well.
Very good. Now, here's the fun bit. You've sent through a bird sound, as we do every Saturday that you appear on here. Now, we're going to play the sound of a bird, and it's up to you to guess it. 6255 if you want to get in touch down here. And like I said, you'll get some bragging rights there as far as that's concerned. So, but I'll just play it now. Here we go. Easy one, do you think, Neil?
I think it is, as long as people don't think they're bellbirds. I think they're an easy one.
Okay, we can rule out bellbirds. But 6255 if you think you know what it is, ring up and have a guess and get in touch with us down here. And like I said, you'll get to tell all your mates that you knew what the sound was on 2CC during the Canberra Weekender. And we're having a chat with Neil Hermes, who is Canberra ornithologist and author. Now, we're just going to play that sound again ever so quickly, Neil.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, hang on. Okay, a small snippet there, and we've got Diane on the line. She reckons she might know what it is. Hello, Diane.
Good morning.
Now, you're going to have a crack at it. What do you think that sound is?
A rosella.
A rosella, Neil?
Look, Diane, that's a very good guess. Some rosella calls have that sort of sound, and yes, you could mistake that call. In the bush, you would hear that call as a softer call, whereas the rosella is a stronger call. So you'd probably, if you heard it in the bush, be able to tell that it was not a rosella because it's not as rich and full. But no, very good guess. A very similar sound.
Thank you.
Thanks, Diane.
Sorry about that, Diane. A very good guess, but no cigar. So, but any other guesses, we will welcome them on 6255 whilst we're waiting for those to roll through, Neil, what's this about rare birds rocking up in the suburbs?
Yeah, this is it's a sort of story that turns up every now and again, but perhaps we'll see it more often. There's some photos have been posted of albino and variously coloured common birds. So kookaburras that are white and magpies that are white or partly white. And look, this is something that occurs all the time. Evolution is constantly throwing up variations on the colour of species. The question that people are asking, and people see them, and normally these birds would not survive for very long. If you're a white budgie living in the wild amongst a flock of green budgies, more than likely a goshawk is going to take you first. So it doesn't have an adaptive advantage if you're white.
Yep.
And the same sort of thing with a magpie or a kookaburra. You're going to stand out in the crowd, and maybe that's not a good thing. But if the habitats are changing around you, sometimes you might find yourself advantaged. So one of the suggestions is some of these whitish-looking kookaburras and whitish-looking magpies and other albinos and variations on the colour that we see, perhaps in an urban environment, some of these species might actually find it's an advantage. A lot of concrete around, a lot of buildings around. It actually provides a better protection. And of course, this has been known for many centuries in things like moths, where moths changed their colour during the Industrial Revolution in the UK. So it's not something unexpected. A little unexpected perhaps amongst birds.
Yep.
But yes, watch out for those oddly coloured crimson rosellas or kookaburras or eastern rosellas or magpies around, because they seem to be turning up a bit more, and maybe it is a bit of a pattern.
Well, it's not just concentrated over one area, is it? We're not looking at one particular region saying, oh yeah, rare birds are turning up there. It seems to be all over Australia, Neil.
Yeah, look, and it always has been. I mean, back in the 18th century, there were various people used to think that albino birds were really were worthy of extra study, and they would get captured, and people would have collections of albino birds, or collect them and shoot them and put them in museums and have special sections for albino birds and mammals, for that matter. So they were seen as oddities and unusual, and they were widespread, and it's not uncommon that we see them. The question that we're asking ourselves today is, are they becoming a bit more abundant in some places because there is an advantage in actually having different colours than the normal bird that we would see?
Very good. And now, in light of, let's say that we were to see more and more rare birds appearing in the suburbs. I mean, I'm just thinking, would this lead to the idea of a rare bird within the suburbs? Do you think people would be more likely to, I don't know, potentially cage them, that sort of thing, and say, look, I've got a rare bird?
That has happened in the past.
I think that would just be a very poor outcome, as opposed to sitting back and observing the beauty and, just saying, oh, look, isn't that lovely? And that's, we're very privileged to see it in the suburbs, instead they just...
Sure, and of course, many of our unusual forms of particularly parrots that we have in captivity these days, where you have, I mentioned budgies before. I mean, the budgies in the wild are all green.
Yep.
But in captivity, we have all sorts of colours. And the source of some of those unusual birds would have been a bird captured in the wild that was an unusual colour. But, it's also just from the breeding that's done by aviculturists of captive birds. So it would be a sad outcome if these birds were particularly targeted for whatever reason. They should just be allowed to get on with their thing. And if it turns out that they do well, and we end up with a population of, albino magpies living in your garden, that would be a special thing.
Wouldn't it? So, and we're still welcoming everyone's calls, 6255 1206, if you wanted to have a crack at what this bird sound is. Now, we'll play it again. Yes, a bit of a cryptic one there. So 6255 1206 if you want to have a crack at that. And if you get it right, well, Neil will tell you you're all right. So that's fantastic. So, yeah, very good. Now, in weeks and months to come, Neil, have you got any tours planned? Are you planning on going anywhere particularly exciting?
I've got some great tours that we're going to be doing between now and the end of the year, Josh. I've got a trip to Norfolk Island to see the birds there and do a bit of history buff activities. I've got a fantastic trip in August going out to try and see some albatross from Jervis Bay, which will be great. That's just a one-day trip. We go out well out to sea and see if we can see some albatross, and then a couple of other trips to parts of inland New South Wales. So yeah, I've got a pretty active program for the rest of the year, and people can track that down on my website, neilhermes.com.au, and have a look at the various trips. The other thing I do, Josh, is every month I do a little bird walk. It's only a couple of hours at the Jerrabomberra Wetlands area.
Yep.
So for beginners wanting to, get a little bit of a feel for bird watching, they can come out with me, and we have a look at a few common birds over a couple of hours, and that's on the first Sunday of every month. So people should check that out on my website as well. So that's always fun for people that have, have a bit of interest in birds and just like to be pointed out a few tips and a few birds that perhaps they see around that they're not quite sure of, and it just gives people a nice little introduction, and it's a pleasant walk as well. Very good.
Well, with 45 seconds to go, Neil, I think we should put people out of their misery. What was the bird sound?
Okay, so the bird call is a very common bird. It's one of our tiniest birds. It's a spotted pardalote.
Yep.
It's sometimes called the diamond bird. They are exquisitely coloured, and they feed in the very tops of the eucalypts very hard to see often, but they have that ringing bell type call, and you'll often hear it around Canberra. So the Spotted Pardalote, beautiful bird, and quite a characteristic call.
Outstanding. Well, with 5 minutes to go until news time, I'm afraid our time together has come to an end, Neil, but thank you so much for calling in this morning. I always enjoy our chats.
Yeah, fabulous, Josh, and have a great long weekend, and all your listeners as well.
We fully intend to. Thanks, mate. Take care. Neil Hermes joining us. Neil Hermes joining us there. He is a Canberra author and ornithologist with over 50 years under his belt, and of course, you can find out what he is doing at neilhermes.com.au.